Welcome everybody to this World Satsanga held on the 19th of December 2020 in conjunction with Kevin Moore and The Moore Show and his latest YouTube channel they call us Channelers, which is a very interesting series of shows that show various different qualities of individual who are channeling information from the greater reality. Okay, so let's look at the agenda for December's World Satsanga, which is just before Christmas. So Merry Christmas to you all, and let's hope that 2021 is a more fruitful and productive year than this year has been. Okay, so the agenda is as follows. I'm going to do a short talk on how I know the overall frequency of humanity and how it can be calculated, or whether it can be calculated. That's one way to look at it. And then we're going to go through the questions. There's quite a lot of questions. In fact, there's so many questions I've had to put one group of questions back to January. So thank you to everybody who sent those questions in. They are very good questions and they're going to have a very enlightening set of responses, I hope. And then we're going to do a meditation to open everybody's minds and hearts to the greater reality and to change how we live and how we interact with it. Okay. So the question about how I know the overall frequency of humanity and how it can be calculated is actually quite a simple response, to be honest. It can't be calculated. You see lots of different things of people saying that it's this, it's that. You know, we have a frequency of the Earth based upon known resonant frequencies that mankind uses, but the frequencies that I talk about are not quite as we understand it. We use the word frequency to describe the different frequential levels associated with the construct and the structure of the multiverse, but it's something a bit more subtler than that. So in terms of people who say it can be calculated, it actually can't be in terms of what we are. It's a function of evolution. It's a function of our evolution whilst we're incarnate and how we work together whilst we're incarnate as to whether we are raising our ability to communicate and connect with the greater reality or our true energetic self, which we sometimes call the Godhead or the Oversoul or the higher self. And so such, you know, it's difficult to put numbers on it. Now, sometimes I ask questions about what is somebody's frequency, and I say, well, basically, you're around 3.5 in terms of the levels associated with the human form, and its relevance to the frequencies that are part of the physical universe. Physical universe having 12 frequencies, but those frequencies are not the same as what we would call a frequency, because our frequencies are much lower. Much lower than what is required to create an understanding of the structure of the multiverse. So although the word frequency is used, it's actually something slightly different. So in terms of humanity, I tend to get a feeling for it. Yeah, it's a bit like using clairsentience or knowingness, or the connectivity to know that if we have to put a structure in place, because mankind uses structure to try to explain stuff that is basically structureless, although it gives us a helping hand to understand it. I mean, when I do the Traversing the Frequencies workshops, I show a number of different ways to understand how the structure of the multiverse works. And then when we do the workshop, we move from structure to structureless. We find that although we can understand in a rudimentary way the structure of the multiverse and the frequencies that are associated with us and the subdimensions and full dimensions, and if we want to go into further detail, zones and continuums, etc. above that, then we start to get into a position where we can understand some way of understanding, if that makes any sense. We have a tool to help us understand a tool, And so when I say a frequency, it's giving us an understanding of how far an individual, or humanity in this instance, has evolved in a way which allows them to access various aspects of the multiversal environment. That multiversal environment represented by the physical universe in this particular instance. Okay, so in terms of it being calculated, it can't, because there's no means to calculate something which is incalculable as such. All we can do is reference it in an intuitive way to a structure that we're using as a bit of an interface to understand the different levels that we can achieve within the structure of the multiverse, in this instance the physical universe, in relevance to where we are from an incarnate, and how our evolutionary level works with us whilst we're incarnate. So for me it's a really intuitive thing, and if people show me mathematics associated with it, I would say, well, if you want to think of it that way, you can do, but it can't be calculated. It's something that I intuitively know, and I see. If I see somebody and somebody asks me what their frequency is, I can tell them. I can tell whether they've gone up or whether they've gone down. And any connected individual or somebody who is self-realized will be able to do a similar thing based upon their own level of understanding. And if we wanted to use the same methodology, they would be able to convert or overlay their understanding of where we are with that as well. Okay, so based upon that, it's incalculable. It's understood. It's used. It's intuitively known when we, or connectively known when we enter into a transcendental meditation or a samadhi state. Okay, or even just being connected all the time, or meditating on it. It's something that you know. You simply know, and as a result of that, if you wanted to go into a level of detail associated with the evolution of an individual, and how it's got to that position, it would take a long time to get the details associated with it, because there's an awful lot of information revolving around an aspect or soul incarnate, and their true energetic self, or Godhead or Oversoul, that much larger portion of them, which is still within the structure of the multiverse, and stays there to give you an understanding of what can be used in terms of what they are. So it's a very difficult thing to ascertain in a simple way. Okay, so I hope that's answered the question, because it's very sort of esoterical, but it's supposed to be. It's there's nothing that mankind has created as a metric that can be used for it. The models I use are there to help us move in a direction. Once we've moved into that direction and we start to become expansive, we then get to a point where we can start to understand the structural aspect of it, or should I say, start to accept it rather than understand it. Okay, well, I hope that's quite a good question that started that particular short lecture, as it happens, and it is only a short lecture. It's only about 8 minutes, but basically it's a very difficult subject because it's not quantifiable in that way. And then the answers that come along that I get are literally just given to me, and I trust them because I know that with the source of the information. Okay, so let's have a look at the questions. We've got a lot of questions from a number of individuals. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 individuals spanning questions over nearly 3 sheets of paper here, which is quite pretty good. So the first question is actually, there's a bit of a preamble to it as well. It's from AB. And AB asks the question, what is the best method to get out of one's concepts, thought patterns, habits, and other conditions of mind? And it said, before you answer, however, I'd like to note that I cannot mentally get past this paradox. And the paradox is, if I identify with my ego, as I cannot help to do, then not identifying with my ego would put my ego, would just be my ego trying to identify with my ego. So it's a bit of a catch-22 there. So the problem? Moreover, if I'm the result of the conditioning, then attempting to get free from conditioning would inherently be absurd. So it seems that any attempt to get out of the loop of ego activity just feeds the loop further, and that it doesn't really matter since I really have nothing to escape from anyway. But I've tasted seeing things freshly alive without the distortion of concepts and other images, so that I also understand the way ordinary perception absolutely pales in comparisons to the particular way of being. So do you have any advice or say on this? Is every method really just a trap in the end? If not, what is the best way to achieve a mindless state or beginner's mind? The Japanese have a word for beginner's mind. It's called mushin. It's emptiness, basically. And so what the best way to really move out of one's concepts and thought patterns and conditions of mind is to, and it's a bit coarse, this is, to be honest, is to just accept that everything we've known before is irrelevant. Now, that may also be feeding the ego in some way, shape, or form. Understanding that the ego is actually a function of us being incarnate is an important thing, and because we will never lose the ego while we are incarnate, and anybody says that they're in control of their ego or they've eradicated their ego is being fooled by their ego, and hence the start of this preamble by AB. So what we need to understand is that we can work with the ego to create a condition where it sort of sustains, it knows it's going to be sustained, but not in the level that it wants to be in. But nevertheless, we try to change the way in which our ego perceives things. So, in essence, what we're trying to do is to stop and start again, and reprogram that personality that's created as a function of being incarnate, and almost we need to, I wouldn't say write off everything we've done or delete it, but put it to one side and start again with fresh eyes approach, with a new approach. It's like going to school or university and learning a new subject that you've never seen before, heard of before, discussed before, or had any knowledge of before. Okay, so you go into the classroom and you learn as a complete beginner, and so that's what we have to do. We have to say everything I know is in the past, or didn't exist, or is there as another life, for example, another incarnation. And then we have to consider that basically everything that we learn now is brand new. Everything that we consider, think about, behave, or work with is new, and then we can start to reprogram ourselves. But we have to start from scratch. We have to sort of stop relating to what we were previously, what we thought of previously, how we considered things previously, that things that we thought were our datums in knowledge no longer exist. So we have to put ourselves in a position where we start again, basically, and that's the only way to do it. It's very hard, very, very hard. So I can understand the question about how it could potentially feed the ego, but or go in an egoic loop where you're going from one particular consideration to another consideration, and that consideration of trying to detach from the ego actually reassigns us to the ego or reinforces the connection with the ego. But if we think that all we're doing is reprogramming it instead, so the ego stays, but it's being reprogrammed, it's a bit like another way to think of it is having a new computer. Okay, or a new phone. You put all it's brand new, it's fresh, it's empty. Then you start to put your own stuff in there, and then it becomes you. So if you put different stuff in there, it's a different machine to what the old machine was. And that's the way to think of that's the way to think of the ego, is that we are reprogramming that particular aspect of us, our personality, if you like, that's hidden sort of subconscious personality, to being something else. And then as we start to work on that and not relate to what we were, we start to create a new us, which is also detached from what we were and the potential reality that we've created around ourselves to create a new us and a new reality. Okay, well, I hope that answers that question. It's a good, very good question, and it's a very hard thing to overcome. Okay. Right, so the next question, basically I think that I've answered this question in the short lecture. It's from US, and the question is, the number of backfill people who have been increasing steadily over the years from the original 8% of population to alarming 41% in 2020. Yeah. You said they are located mostly in the Western world, US. Please explain. Does the US have a larger percentage of backfill people than, say, China, Russia or Europe? How does that affect the world's superpower relationships over the next 30 years? If you'd like to say more about it, please do. That could be a private communication, as the case may be, or address it in December's lecture. So the question was, how do I calculate it? Well, I've just gone through the calculation. There isn't a calculation; it's basically intuitive. So that's how That's how I gain that. And I basically, I don't know which event spaces I go into, and in terms of getting this information, it just comes to me. And those people who've done the TTF exercises will realise that when we go into the higher level of level 3, we start to realise that we can move the multiverse around us rather than go to different aspects of the multiverse. So it's a bit like that. Okay. So, but I'll just look at some of these other parts here. The first part, the number of backfill people is mostly in the Western world, not specifically in the US, but it's sort of evenly distributed, and certainly it's more prevalent in areas where there is poverty. Certainly, where people are focused upon their physical survival, is where we start to see the increase in backfill people. Now, this doesn't mean to say that they're bad people. It just means to see that they're more focused on being in the physical, and they stand less chance of becoming aware and awake or self-realised, or they in fact don't become self-realised or aware and awake. And I'm being given a couple of locations here, places like Brazil and Mexico, where there's a lot of corruption. There's corruption everywhere in the world, actually. So I don't know why those two countries became sorted out or became examples. Places like Mexico, Brazil, etc., where there's a lot of, shall we say, difficulty in existing. There's lots of things happening that are wrong. Lots of governance that is wrong. It's difficult to survive. The opportunity to have a good job or a good role is difficult. Moving out of the squalor, for instance, which we have anywhere in the world, of poor living, is difficult to get out of because of the environment and the individuals around us. These places tend to sort of, shall I say, perpetuate this potential area. So even backfill people can't have a zero chance of getting any better, or should I say, even really evolved people have a difficult chance in getting better there. Backfill people in environments that are, shall we say, more enlightened, tend to also absorb that enlightenment as well, but not to the same level as a human soul, so to speak. So, to answer the question, it seems to be where there's more materialism is where the backfill people tend to be primarily located. So it's anywhere where materialism is the dominant way of existing is where the percentages are. I hope that answers the question, because I think it didn't quite answer the question last time. So it doesn't give a percentage. It just tells you that materialism is an addictive function. It's a function of karma, and this is where we tend to find that the backfill people tend to become part of, because it's potentially a greater level of, or should we say, a level of free will which they're going into, and one where the everybody can get addicted to. Okay. Let's look at the second part of this question. Is it an average of, so we're wondering about whether you could discuss in your lecture the overall frequency of humanity and how that you can calculate that. Well, I've mentioned that. Is it an average of all humanity, including the hotspots of higher and lower frequencies, in which event space is the one you and I are in right now? So, answering the rest of this question as a sort of supplement to the little lecture at the start. Yes, I get an average of all of humanity, including the hotspots and lower. So I get the higher, the lowest of the highs and the highest of the lows, and the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows, and it all averages out to give me an overall frequency of the Earth, and it includes the event spaces that we all create and the local realities that we all create in total. So it's the sphere that is the Earth that we get. I get the overall average of humanity's frequency. As we're told, it's not quite the frequency that we understand from a physics perspective. So it's an average of that. So the next part of it down here is that The reason I ask this is a lot of channels are saying that with COVID we are processing all the chakra issues starting from the roots to the crown, and it will take 6 to 7 years, 2027. And 2027 is a year when things will change for the better, much better, and 2040 is a year when the first contact with the fourth frequency hybrids will take place, at least in some event space. What do you see? Is it that just one event stream scenario, or 1,000 of others? We are keenly waiting for the publication of my next book on psychospiritual healing, blah, blah, blah. But in the meantime, can you explain a bit more about the link between the frequency levels and the chakras in Hands of Light? Barbara Brennan wrote. Right, let me just come back to that in a moment. The first part, basically, there's no association with COVID-19 and any chakra issues we've got. It's simply a function of the normal way in which the Earth responds to us having too many individuals on the planet. There are the human. If you think of it in this condition, back in 1900, 1900, the start of the 20th century, there was 1.6 billion incarnate souls on the planet, or should we say 1.6 incarnate vehicles on the planet. 120 years later, there's 7.8. We've increased by a function of 5. So any viruses that naturally occurred through being lower frequency would not have spread in the way they're spread now. So it's like a self-defeating function. The more populous we become, the more chance we get of having viruses affect us that reduce the population. And to be honest, in terms of the whole population, COVID's not going to make much of a dent. Although people do leave their incarnations, and it's traumatic for the families who don't understand the greater reality, in essence, in comparison to the whole population of the Earth, and the souls that are incarnating who chose to leave the Earth in this particular way, it's not going to make a massive difference. So there's no chakra issues associated with it, okay? Other than the ability for us to become infected or affected by dysfunction or viruses is a direct result of our frequency level. So if you think of it in this way, when we decided, or of course we should say collectively, unconsciously decided that we'd made it in 2012 or just before 2012, and we didn't need to work on ourselves anymore, then we started to get complacent. And when we start to get complacent, we slowly start to drop down the frequencies and fall asleep again. That means we start to become more involved with the immersion in our incarnation. When we do that, we lose frequency. We drop down again. So we don't keep the frequency, we can drop down, and we can drop down quite significantly. And I've seen some spiritual people become unspiritual in the space of a very short space of time. So when this happens, we start to become more associated with the gross physical and the things that can affect us in the gross physical. So if you see somebody as a high frequency individual, they generally don't get colds or coughs or viruses or illnesses, those sorts of things. See people who are lower frequency, and they do tend to get those things because they're attracted to lower frequency interaction. So the higher the frequency, the less dense the gross physical is. The lower the frequency, the more dense the gross physical is. So things like COVID and other viruses, of which there's obviously lots, and they're all coronavirus variants. There's lots of coronavirus variants. They either attach themselves to you or they don't. And they can attach themselves to you if your gross physical, your incarnate vehicle is low frequency because it's denser, so it gets stuck to it. If your vehicle is your human body is higher frequency, it passes through the structure, so it doesn't attach to it. Okay, it may be difficult to understand this, and it'd be difficult to sort of prove it from a physical perspective, scientific perspective. But these things wouldn't attach themselves because they can't attach properly. They're out of phase with the frequency of the gross the gross physical aspect of our incarnate vehicle. Okay. Will things change for the better? I'm seeing around, I think 2040 is a year when we're going to start to see things getting better, start to understand things. In terms of seeing hybrid incarnate vehicles, Well, we're already seeing hybrid incarnate vehicles, and those are basically some of the hybrid children, the rainbow children who could be a mixture of rainbow and indigo, or rainbow, indigo and crystal, and the various different variants of hybridation from those. So we're already seeing those anyway. But there's lots of different scenarios right now, and we're a bit unstable at the moment because there's all sorts of things happening around us that we've sort of let happen, starting to accept or unaccept, and there's that much discord basically on the earth in all sorts of different ways that we could go in, as the text here says, is this one just one event stream in a scenario of 1,000 of others. Right now we have a lot of different scenarios we could go down, and the possibility, but what I'm seeing is though the slightly dominant scenario is that we're going to start to understand how we need to interact with each other and take more responsibility for our actions individually and collectively. Okay, so coming back to the next part, which I'll repeat again, we are keenly waiting for the publication of your next book on psycho-spiritual healing, but in the meantime, can you explain a bit more about the link between the frequency levels and the chakras? In The Hands of Light, Barbara Brennan wrote, each aura has its own set of 7 major chakras, each located in the same place as the physical body. For example, the 4th chakra, there in brackets, there are really 7 chakras, each of a higher frequency band than the lower one. These chakras appear to be nested with each other like nested glasses. Okay, what is the relevant frequency of an etheric body and the 4th frequency chakra versus the emotional body? 4th chakra versus the mental body, 4th chakra, is it graduated or immeasurable like 1.4 versus 2.4 or 3.4, or something completely different? Given that each frequency band has 12 sub-frequencies or 144 sub-sub-frequencies. How does that come into play when we move up the frequencies as we evolve and ascend, say from the 3rd frequency level to the 4th frequency level? Are these chakras always running and available to us at every level, or do we just need to grow into them to operate them more efficiently at the next highest level? Please explain. Well, this part at the bottom of that question there is actually going to be sort of slightly irrelevant at the moment, because certainly part of the question, because I've looked at this question and I was really quite interested, because what I see isn't specifically what Barbara's described in her book, The Hands of Light, and I feel I understand the reason why. Each chakra, okay, is predominantly represented or represents an energy template, and those energy templates operate on a certain frequency level. So we have the root chakra operating on the 1st frequency level, we have the sacral chakra on the 2nd frequency level, the solar chakra on the 3rd, etc., etc. So we get the crown chakra operating on the 7th. And so if you look at, as a healer, if you're looking at the person and you look at them pan-frequentially, that means you're looking at them from outside of their form and you're seeing all the frequencies together. You see a set of chakras and you see the energy templates nested together, almost creating one. When you only focus on one particular frequency level, you see the energy template associated with that frequency level, let's say the 4th frequency level, and you see the heart chakra associated with that. Okay, that chakra deals with energies and frequencies associated at that level and feeds the energy template associated with that level. It can't feed the other templates. It doesn't work in that way. What I feel has happened is that Barbara has seen things in a pan-frequential state, seen the templates all sort of nested together, and thought that there's going to, and because she's seen the chakras all in one go, which is what you would do, that she's considered that there will be or feels that she's seeing a bunch of nested chakras as well. But my understanding is it doesn't work that way. I also understand that there's sometimes as people relate to the auric layers as well. Well, the auric layers, in my understanding, are they're basically a waste product. You know, when we turn a light bulb on, okay, we get light because that's what we want the light bulb to do. But the waste product is heat and magnetic radiation. So if you discount the heat and you got a special camera that's able to look at and register magnetic radiation, you see magnetic waves around the coil of the bulb as well. So in the bulb's condition, you've got you've got the gross physical, you've got the waste product in two ways: the magnetic radiation, and you've got the heat as well, plus the light, which is what we're trying to create with this. So in terms of the auric layers, you've got the auric layers are a waste product, basically. They're the heat, if you want to call it that, or should I say more accurately, it's the magnetic radiation associated with that. We'll call it magnetic radiation because it's easy to understand. It's not that, but it's a good example. So the gross physical and the spiritual physical aspects of the human form, discounting the other three higher functions, which are step down function, to allow the aspect or soul to incarnate into the human vehicle, create the body in totality. Okay, that's the vehicle we incarnate into. So that's created through 7 layers, and each of those 7 layers need to be fed energy independently, but collectively together to work. Each of those has a chakra associated with them. When we're looking at things pan-frequentially, we see the energy templates nested together, but the chakras appear all as one group of chakras. Okay, so I feel that Barbara was maybe seeing things slightly in error, or interpreted things in a different way to what I see. Okay, so I see it quite clearly. Excuse me. I had to have a quick drink of water there. I had a bit of a coughing moment. As I see, got excited, obviously. As I see it, when the energy comes into the particular chakra, it energizes the function of that energy template, which is a component part of the incarnate human vehicle that we have, of which there's 7 component parts plus another higher functions of the step down frequencies of 8, 9, and 10. The function of allowing the body to act, to work and be animated by the soul, creates waste. Okay, it's a lossy function being here, and lossy means that you use energy and you waste energy. We imbibe and we eat food. Some of the energy is taken into the food, we metabolize it, it sustains the gross physical aspect of our body. Waste comes out in feces and urine. Okay, in a motor car, we put in petrol or diesel, we work the car, it goes forwards, we get carbon emissions and water particulates out of the exhaust pipe, and heat in the engine. It's a waste product. So all the time that the chakras are working and they're feeding these energy templates, they're also creating a waste product, an electromagnetic or energy field associated with that particular frequency level. So each of the auric layers is a waste product associated with the function of the chakra feeding the energy template of the human vehicle. Okay, so that's what I see there. So it's the energy templates that are nested together as one, not the chakras. Although when you look at the human form in a pan-frequential way, you see all of those energy templates nested together, and you see one set of chakras. If you isolate a frequency to look at one energy template, let's say the throat, the fifth chakra, the fifth frequency, you see the energy template in the 5th frequency, and you only see the 5th chakra, or the 5th chakra, the front and rear aspects of the 5th chakra, the throat chakra. And when I look at this, I understand that. I think Barbara understood it, but she couldn't quite grasp the concept surrounding it, because even in her in the diagrams in her books, you can see the energy templates in a sort of representation, and then separately there's the auric layers as well. So you can start to understand that it's maybe just a misunderstanding there. So I hope that explains that and what it means. Okay. So the question about what's the relevant frequency of an etheric body, well, basically the relative frequency of an etheric body is always the first frequency. Okay. The mental body is always the frequency of the mental body. So it's using the names associated with the different energy templates, okay? Because these are the names of the energy templates, not the names of the auric layers. So it's something else. But this is fine. I mean, the whole point of all this is that we have teachers like Barbara to get us to a certain level. And then, if the teacher's been good, we can rise above that teacher. And then those teachers teach others, and if they're good, they get their students above them as well. So hopefully this explains what's going on here. And so again, each of these particular chakras have little vortices within them that deal with the sub-frequencies as well. So if you like, the tolerance associated with a particular frequency is dealt with by the vortices within the chakra itself. Okay, each of them deals with the sort of the frequencies slightly above them or slightly below them, so to speak, so you don't get any overlap in terms of the way the chakras work in frequentially, because they always separate out at some point to become one, rather than a combination of 1, 2, or 3. Okay, well, I hope that helps that question. It's probably not the answer that was expected, but it's certainly what I feel is the best way to answer it. Okay. Next question is from FN, and there's 3 questions here. The first question is: there are many people who are using spirituality for political gain or to sway non-secular people to support them. For example, there is one running for Mayor of London in your area who discusses experiencing and awakening with ayahuasca, and others in different countries, including the US. How do your guides or sources see these individuals' roles in shaping the current event space? Are they helping in the long run to move up the frequencies, or do they, or are they another form of distraction or form of political gamesmanship to gain support from expanding non-secular voters? Yes, some people may well have taken ayahuasca. I don't condone the taking of ayahuasca, because it's a mechanical way of achieving some level of very transient connectivity with the greater reality. And that includes things like cocaine and LSD and all these sorts of things. You know, Timothy Leary in the old days, turn on, tune in, drop out. It was all to do with, you know, being connected and using drugs as a mechanical aid. The problem is it's unsustainable, and it ultimately damages not only the gross physical aspect of our incarnate vehicle, but it also can damage the frequencies associated with the aspect or soul as well. But I mean, this thought here about whether aligning oneself to a particular sect or spiritual set of individuals who either believe or know, experientially know, about spirituality and the greater reality in some way, shape or form, and saying, oh, I've done this and I know a bit more about that, and so you can follow me if you want to, is not new, actually. In fact, if anybody goes to India, you'll see all over India there's absolutely massive posters of the local politicians, and they've all got pictures of Krishna, etc., Babaji, and those sorts of things in the background to suggest that they're working with these particular gods or gurus, and that they should be trusted as a result of it, which is complete nonsense. So they've got pictures of Ganesh and all that sort of stuff there. It's quite bizarre. So they try to align themselves with spirituality to try and get the spiritual vote, when actually all they are is being very, very materialistic individuals. So be aware. Okay? Use your intuition to understand whether somebody who says that they are spiritual but are using it for political gain are actually using it for political gain, or just showing their spiritual preference or belief system preference. Okay, so just be aware. So it can be both. It can be both a bit of a con, or it can be real. Okay, just use your intuition aspect. But taking the example of India, they're very blatant with it. Very blatant. It's I encourage you to go into try and go onto an India website or something and just look at or try and put into Google or something a request for a search for political advertisement in places like Bangalore or Mumbai or Hyderabad or whatever. And just see if you can see some of the posters online. It's quite good. It's quite good. Next question, number 2. Many people, including the spiritual community, are followers of groups like Qanon or other similar group or cults. It appears that social media is targeting individuals with a propensity for supporting such groups and feed them propagandas reinforcing their conviction and support. How are these groups able to generate such extreme support from individuals who used to be or are pro-environment and pro-raising humanity's consciousness? How can such transformation be accomplished, although each person will take his or her journey? Is it advisable to assist our friends who are completely lost to such thought? What are the sources of suggestions, if any? Well, it's their free will, is what's just come through from what I've just been told straight away. Again, it's this thing about wanting to be in communion all the time. When we are incarnate, we lose our communion, our sense of communion, because when we're disincarnate and we're in the energies, we're always in communion. We're always in total connectivity with everything and everyone that is around us, energetically. So when we're here, we feel cut off because the drastically reduced communicative bandwidth. And so that's what creates the ego, of course. And then we get to the point where we want to feel that we're part of something. We're part of a community. So we seek communion. And basically, these cults or other groups, etc., feed upon, they understand the basics of working and using certain words to attract members by suggesting they're going to get things like, big love, for instance, or are going to try and change the world by doing this, that, and the other. And all they're doing is just basically controlling people's free will. No, it's their free will to be controlled. So basically, what they do is they look at, they understand the psychology surrounding certain individuals or certain groups of spiritual individuals, and they use the words that would invoke their interest. And within that, they've also got, if there's a number of them working together, you've also got this synergetic effect associated with the broadcast of the energy behind the message, and they get attracted to it. So unless you're detached from all of this, you do run the risk of being attracted to this stuff anyway, and pulled into it. So you really have to be very, 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 very careful what you see, what you see and hear about. Use your intuition. Is this right, or is it just misinformation, or is it just nonsense? And the problem with social media is it affects a lot of people very quickly. And as a result of affecting a lot of people very quickly, it gains a synergetic effect very quickly. And that increases the energy surrounding it really quickly as well, and massively. And people sense this energy, but they're not able to discern what the energy is, but they sense it as being big, and they want to be part of it. So that's sort of the mechanics of how it works. Okay. How do you change somebody around who you can see going the wrong way and being sucked into one of these things? It's difficult, because you stand more chance of losing them as a friend by telling them that they've been suckered, basically, than what you would do if you just there for them. The best thing to do is be you, and just continue to be you, and just work on your own knowledge-based system. Okay, and that's the best way to move forward. So your energies will, in some small way, counteract the other energies of the other individual, because if you know the truth, and you felt the truth, and you experience the truth, then you broadcast the truth. And so when these individuals are in your presence and in your energies, they will also start to have a little bit of an antidote. So basically, the best thing to do is just be there as a friend, but don't be pulled into their energies or thought processes. Don't back it up, and don't argue against it, because you'll just create a resistance to that, and they'll go the opposite way. So it's just basically just be there as a friend, knowing that your own direction for you is right, and that you're happy with that particular direction, because that's part of your free will. Okay, next and last question from FN. During the November Satsanga, you mentioned in the next 15 to 20 to 30 years we will become more mature and act in a service-based way and understand or maintain our environment. However, you also mentioned that currently about 60% of these timelines are heading towards the wrong direction in the long run. How do we reconcile these drastic shifts from some harmony and maturity within the next 30 years to much more disharmony in the next 150 to 200 years, at least in some event spaces? We need to sort of show that we're thinking and behaving and acting in a way which is of service to others, of service to our environment, and of service to to ourselves as a result of that. So we need to remove our selfishness. We need to remove our material desires to allow us to have just the basics to live in a comfortable way, but not too more than that. And we need to illustrate this by walking our talk. And in doing that, and if and when somebody asks us, blah 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 this, blah 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 that, we say, well, I'm working in a way which is in sympathy with the environment and in sympathy with the needs of others around me. And so, as we think, behave, and act in this way, and if questioned, we broadcast it. We don't push it. We just say why we're doing it. We don't enter into any conversation because sometimes the resulting conversation can be result in friction or even in resistance later, so it can be detrimental. We just sort of put the seed out there, and that's it. The seed will grow. Even in unfertile areas, we have plants growing in deserts and in rocky areas like lava-based landscapes. So we just need to make sure that we maintain our own equilibrium, and we start to work in a way which is even if we have a caustic environment that we work within, we just need to maintain, and it's hard, but we just need to maintain our own higher frequency and just show that there's a better way by being that better way, and eventually it will catch up. Okay, it's difficult, but I'm seeing it's a good chance of 40% chance of doing it. 40% chance is better than no percent chance, but that's only because right now we've got a level of complete disharmony and confusion on the planet, and we've got lots of broadcastings from Sir David Attenborough saying that we're losing the flora and fauna at an alarming rate, which we are. We always have been, but it's like everything else. This thing is growing exponentially. We need to change away from fossil fuels. We need to change away from dangerous methods of creating electricity. We need to change between more in harmony with the environment and use the environment and manufacture things in a way which isn't polluting. And we need to work with each other, supporting each other, being of service to each other, and also allow others to respect each other and respect the work that's done for them. Okay, so it's really a case of not letting people just perpetuate themselves on benefits all the time, because they're not actually gaining any respect for themselves or those around them, but it's helping them to become self-sustaining as well. There's an old saying: you can give a man a fish and you'll feed him for a day. If you give a man a fishing rod and teach him how to fish, he'll feed himself for the rest of his life. And that's the way to think about it. Okay, we've got some questions now from OM. Last series of questions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, 5, I think. And some of these could be quite complex answers, actually. The first one, OM, by the way, is the lovely lady who's just finished the translation of the History of God into Japanese, and is potentially looking at another book, and maybe I'll be helping to encourage others to also act as translators to Japanese. Fantastic person. Are you experiencing samadhi when you're communicating with the source entities and and their origin? There are times when I do, but basically I get enough information to be here and there at the same time. So it's not full samadhi or full transcendental existence. It's a bridge between the two. So depending upon where I am, I'm either in it or outside of it and seeing through a window. If that makes any sense. It's I dip into it as I need to, because I need to be able to work the computer here. So I type things straight into the computer. I enter into this state of beingness, and the information comes, and sometimes I'm there for ages trying to work out how I can convey this concept, which is undescribable, into some way which we can understand, and sometimes it comes quite flowing. Okay. And sometimes I'm there immersed and it takes a long time to come back, and sometimes I'm in this sort of halfway house where I'm looking through a window into that environment. Okay. So how does samadhi feel like? Well, it's undescribable, basically. Imagine being able to see spherically. Okay. So you're not seeing forwards in your eyes, you're seeing up, down, left, right, forwards and backwards at the same time. But also being able to communicate with other entities instantaneously. also being connected to everything in an omnipresent, omniscient way. So everything is there. Imagine being able to, before you've even asked the question, get the answer. Imagine that before you've even considered or finished your thought about where you want to go to, you're there. Imagine about when you want to create something, before you even finished the thought about what you're going to create, it is created. That's an example of what samadhi is like, or what transcendental connectivity is like. Transcendental meditation basically is just another way of saying astral travelling. And samadhi is a sort of a similar thing to that. But it's when you move above, so you do get some level of connectivity associated with that. But if you move out of the frequencies associated with the human vehicle and the physical universe and go into the multiverse, then you get more and more expansivity. It's like being ultimately expansive. It's like being the drop of water, the milliliter of water that's dropped in the sea, and you're suddenly the sea. Imagine being the whole sea. When you're here, you're a milliliter of water. And going from being that milliliter of water to being the whole sea. And being the whole sea, not just a part of the whole sea. That's what it's like. It's undescribable. It really is difficult to describe. Next question, because this lady is very intuitive in her own right, very connected in her own right, very sensitive energetically. I had a chance to see an aspect of Source, but it did not look like a sphere or a white old man, as described in History of God. It looked like a pan-frequential piece of structure containing everything. I had no clue what it was, so I had to ask you to find out. I always thought that God would appear in forms that we can understand, so it puzzled me. How does it decide which forms to take for its children? It depends upon our education and what we can cope with and how we can understand it. We also have an overlay. When we look at things, we translate things based upon our experience. So if we, I've done this before, if we look at a giraffe and we've never seen a giraffe before, what do we call it? If we've not seen anything before that looks like a giraffe, we probably won't see it at all. So we see a white screen. But if we've seen a dog that's got long legs and a horizontal body and a slightly larger neck, we'd probably call the giraffe a form of dog. Okay? And it's, because the dog's got 4 legs, the giraffe's got 4 legs. Dog's got a tail, giraffe's got a tail. Dog's got a snout, giraffe's got a snout. Giraffe's got ears, dog's got ears. The giraffe's got a coat, the dog's got a coat, but the patterns are different. But the patterns are different on dogs anyway. So you start to see how you can start to translate with our total incarnate experience what we're experiencing in terms of what we're seeing. Okay, and then create a translation which is in error. It's only when we're told that a giraffe is a giraffe because of X, Y, and Z that we start to understand, oh, that's a giraffe. And that's the same with connecting with Source. It will connect to us in a way that we can translate or work with, or that it feels it can expand us into for connectivity. So it's basically allowing us to expand or connect with it based upon our capability of communicating or being expansive. Okay. I hope that explains it. Next question. When I'm listening to your Satsanga, sometimes other beings or entities hijack your radio, either partially or entirely, and it takes longer to listen. There seems to be some sort of background communication going on, but I have no clue. Why is it happening? And what are they doing? My internet connections were fine at the time, but I tested the same Satsangas for a few times afterwards and found there were nothing wrong with my recording on PC or my radio. You're basically picking up the connectivity between me and everything else. So you're seeing that there's a plethora of help out there. It's not just me that gets help. Of course, everybody gets help who are working to help other incarnate individuals see beyond what they are from a transient perspective. And so you're seeing other entities that are helping. You might be seeing other Om if they're there. They're very rare. Very transient, of course, but you might be seeing some of those. But it's quite likely you're seeing other entities that are helping as well. And as a result, they may be sort of delighted in what's being given, and they might be delighted in the energy that's being broadcast as a result of the subject matters that I'm talking about, because it's not just the physical words, the spoken words that are being broadcast. It's the energy surrounding the information that's going out as well, and the concepts, and even on being shown there's geometrical shapes that are being broadcast as well, which contain other data associated with it. So there's an awful lot going on in the background, and they're there to help all of you understand at a deeper level what's going on. Even if you don't physically experience any connectivity or anything coming to you, it will be being absorbed in your beingness, in your aspect or soul whilst you incarnate. Okay, so they're there to help us all understand, me as well. Okay, so it's good. So they're all there to help. They're there to help others, and they also, I'm being told right now, they also provide a level of different forms of understanding, so different people can understand it in the way that they're supposed to understand it, rather than the one way that I'm broadcasting as well. So it gives a plethora of different ways of understanding it, so different people can connect and then understand it in a way that they can understand it, rather than failing to understand because they can't understand the way I have particularly spoken in one particular way. Okay. Right. Next question. There's two questions left. One's a biggish question, one's a small question. A question on crystal mining a question on crystal mining and mineral mining. I see lots of stores selling minerals and crystals for profit. I've heard that those are byproducts of mining projects for precious jewels and rare metals for various electronics devices. But some of them are obviously not byproducts of such. I understand that crystals and minerals can evolve faster than by human interactions, but miners probably don't. Ask nature spirits there if they could have them in the first place. I'm starting to wonder if by removing these byproducts can cause energetic imbalance in the local environment, because it's like taking everything from there. How does crystal / mineral mining affect the local environment? They have their own level of sentience associated with them, because there are certain true energetic selves that don't have the same sentient quality, okay, or sentient weight that we do, and so they embarking upon the evolutionary cycle from a different level, a significantly lower level. But the energies that are there help to maintain the environment that is the Earth, the ecostructure, the ecosphere that's the Earth, and so removing them does upset the imbalance. But on the other side, I'm being shown that it does, shall we say, harmonise other areas as well. It creates an averaging effect. So although miners should really be asking for the permission to change the location of such minerals or crystals, when they get basically sold all over the world, they are creating an overall mean energy system. Don't forget the crystalline structures are in connectivity with each other irrespective of where they are. So they're creating a network. As they're being sold all over the world, they're increasing the network of energy associated with them. So it sort of like smooths out the peaks and troughs of the overall frequency of the Earth. And so in doing so, although we need to ask for permission, the movement of them from one place to another place, specifically if it's a lot of these crystals in one location, and removing a chunk of them doesn't make a massive difference to the overall frequency there, or energies there, that moving what's taken out and moving them around the Earth is actually creating out a harmonisation, a balancing effect. So it can be, it's slightly detrimental to the location, but it can be a positive effect to other areas where they move into. So it can be good. And then the last question, if a cat loved catnip so much whilst incarnating, does it develop a certain addiction when it's evolved and incarnated as a human? Catnip is basically a flower that cats become really addicted to, because it's almost like marijuana for cats, if you want to call it that. Yes, it doesn't help them. If an animal soul or group or true energetic self eventually changes into a higher level of evolution and jumps the evolutionary barrier to become on the lowest rung of the human evolutionary level, then they won't have been addicted. Basically, they have to go through the ability to master certain things in their incarnation, the same as what we do, and that can take thousands of incarnations from a group-based perspective. And so when they've also mastered that their particular function of incarnation at that level, which includes being able to walk past catnip and not go crazy over it in this instance, or needing to sniff it or roll around in it or eat it, for instance, then they can go to the next level. So they have to also master incarnation from their perspective as we do before they can move to the next level and incarnate as human beings or other entities of our sentient weight and genre and sentient quality in other locations within the physical universe. Okay, so addictions are addictions. It's karma, so they can also get karma as well, and they can get karma in terms of how they interact with human beings. Specifically, human beings aren't very nice to them. Okay, so that's the end of the questions. I've got some more questions that are available from JM, and we're going to put those on first place in January, and the January Satsanga is going to be on the 30th of January, so it's a bit of a gap between now and then. Okay. We're going to go through the end of Meat Meditation now, which is a meditation to open everybody's minds and hearts to the greater reality and change how we live and interact. So let's just settle down a moment, and hopefully you're sitting in your straight backed chair. So if you don't, you can find one if you can, or if you want to sit cross-legged on the ground, that's fine as well. But don't forget to put your hands palm uppermost on your upper thighs. And have your closed eye vision focused, but not strained on the origin of the spiritual or third eye, which is in between the eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose. And we're just going to see ourselves as a very small speck on the earth, one of these 7.8 billion incarnate vehicles, which will have more than 7.8 billion aspects or souls associated with them, bearing in mind we sometimes have more than one aspect in the same body. And I want you to just feel yourself being part of a grid, a matrix, and at every intersection in the matrix is another soul, another incarnate vehicle. Some of the grid is denser, depending upon the locations of them, in comparison to some places on Earth. So the density of the grid might be greater in cities than it is in the country, for example. But just visualize or use your mentally spoken word to achieve the same thing, that everybody is linked together. It's like a huge grid where some aspects of it are denser grid, others are a more, or should we say, less denser grid. Okay. Think of it like having patterns on a rug. Okay. Some of the patterns might be using thick material, some might be using thin material. Some of the weave might be dense, some of the weave might be not so dense. So we're all connected together. Every one of us is everyone else. Now I want you to visualize this grid being all over the earth as like a sphere around the earth. And now I want you to expand that sphere so it becomes larger and larger, and the weave becomes larger and larger as well, so the gaps in between the different junctures or junctions, where each junction represents an incarnate vehicle with one or two souls or more. are becoming further and further apart. And so we become larger and larger until the Earth becomes a small speck in the middle of this huge sphere. Then we expand further, and the solar system becomes a smaller and smaller speck. And we expand even further, and we start to engulf the galaxy. And the galaxies become smaller and smaller as we expand larger and larger. And then we get much larger. We start to become huge. And we start to become larger than lots and lots of galaxies that are close by. And then we become much larger than all of the galaxies together in the universe. And we start to engulf the universe. Our sphere, our grid of connected incarnate aspects with all the souls associated with those incarnate aspects, either singularly or together, become one huge connected spherical grid that encompasses all of our particular gross physical universe, including all the frequencies. Outside of the physical universe, we start to see that we're part of a bigger structure, a multiversal environment. So let's expand ourselves a bit further, so we start to move ourselves out of the frequencies associated with the first full dimension, which is the gross physical frequencies, and the spiritual physical frequencies, that which creates the physical universe. And we move into the second full dimension, and the 36 frequencies associated with that. And of course the sub-dimensions as well. We just stay there so we can see that there's the structure and the content associated with all the first full dimension, which has got the physical universe in there, and all the universes associated with a certain portion of, we don't need to go above the second full dimension, but let's say we surround 18 of the universes associated with the second full dimension. So we are properly in the multiverse from an energetic perspective. Feel how connected we are. Feel how we're part of a bigger structure. Feel how, although we're individualized, we're actually all one. Feel how whatever happens to one aspect of us happens to all of us. Feel how lucky we are on Earth to not be affected in this way because of the drastically reduced communicative bandwidth. So what happens to one particular aspect we don't notice, because the effect of what happens to that particular aspect doesn't get broadcast effectively enough for us to experience it concurrently. Twins do, or triplets do, because they're part of the same soul, the same aspect that's split between different vehicles, different bodies. So that's a local connectivity. But all of us together, we generally don't realise that when somebody falls over and grazes their knee, that we would all feel that person or child falling over and grazing their knee. But here, in the multiverse where we're all truly connected, we can start to experience that all those children, for example, that fall over and graze their knee, all those old people who have a fall and break their hip, also are experienced by us. So we feel the grazed knee, we feel the broken hip. We start to realise that ultimate connectivity is what we are, and that ultimate connectivity also results in an understanding of what it's like to be somebody else, incarnate in a different environment, in a different circumstance, in a different vehicle. So the rich experience the poor, the fit experience the disability, the disabled experience the fit, the poor experience abject wealth. The leaders experience being led, and those that are led experience being leaders. When we realise that everything is connected and everything affects everybody else, that we realise that that which we do affects us as well, even though we think it's affecting somebody else and not affecting us, we start to realise that we have to change the way we think, behave and act. Because although we can't feel it on Earth in our low frequency vehicles, our human bodies, it still affects us. This is a function of karma. This is the function of karma, of cause and effect. That one small aspect of it associated with creating karmic links between different individual incarnate aspects or groups of aspects. Everything we do affects everybody else, and everything that they do affects us. And so we have to learn through this connectivity, this feeling of beingness, that we need to make sure that what we do doesn't affect anybody else detrimentally. It affects them positively. And everything, therefore, that they do doesn't affect everybody else negatively. It affects them positively. So as we all consider and think, behave and act in a considered way, thoughtful way, meaningful way, mindful way, we all are in service to each other. And so we know that everybody has a responsibility for themselves and for everybody else. And in understanding that responsibility, we create a condition of harmony where everything is equal. Everything is in balance. Everything is in perfection. Everything is in perfection. So, let's just meditate on this state of beingness while we can for a moment. This total connectivity where everything is experienced by everybody else, and so we make sure that that which we experience from somebody else doesn't affect us, because we want to make sure that how we are affected is in a positive way. So we send out positive experiences, thoughts, behaviours and actions so that everybody else can experience the positive side, and that they can do the same thing, and everybody is thoughtful and considered and helpful and in service. We look after the environment. We look after the flora and fauna within the environment. We understand our actions and what they do downstream, how they affect others, how they affect us, how the work of others and the actions of others affect us. Everything is understood because we're working as a collective. Feel how this state of total beingness, collective beingness, isn't so much losing one's individuality, it's gaining omnipresence and omniscience whilst being incarnate. Just feel this condition and what it means to the earth and its inhabitants, its incarnate population. and how, when this condition is reached, it's going to change everything on earth. Okay, so you can do this at home, of course. So let's become less expansive slowly. So let's contract our grid, our spherical matrix, so we start to become smaller. We move out of the frequencies and the subdimensions associated with the second full dimension until we're simply just engulfing the first full dimension, the physical universe. We become smaller, and so we're just encompassing a large number of galaxies, billions of galaxies. We become smaller, we start to encompass or engulf just a few thousand galaxies. We become smaller, and so we're just engulfing just the one galaxy where the Earth is. We become smaller, we're just engulfing a few stars. We become smaller, just engulfing our solar system. We become smaller, we're just engulfing the Earth. We become smaller, we just end up being a grid, a matrix of connected aspects in the different incarnate vehicles across the surface of the Earth. And then we become individualized by disconnecting ourselves from this grid. And so we're just us in our incarnate vehicles, in whichever environment that we're in our rooms, in our studies, in our cars, in our gardens. Wherever you're interacting with this particular satsang and this meditation, you become what you are. Feeling what it's like to be connected with our mind and our hearts to the greater reality, and know that whatever we do affects others, and then therefore whatever they do affects us. So we can change all of this by making sure that whatever we do it positively. So slowly come back into the room, slowly open your eyes, take a drink of water to help ground you. You can do this meditation as often as you like. It's a very nice meditation and it creates a lovely energy. And it will definitely change the way you think, behave and act, and that'll broadcast and be absorbed by those around you as well. Okay, so thank you for listening to this World Satsanga on Saturday the 19th of December. Thank you for participating, thank you for adding to the energy, and I send Source's love and God's love to you all over this next Christmas period, and I'm looking forward to sharing the information as it comes from Source and from the questions from those individuals who send questions in on the next Satsanga, which is the 30th actually of January 2021. And let's visualize and create an abundance of positive change for 2021. Namaste, blessings, and God's love to you all. Did you see the aliens in Crete?